So tonight on the Active Travel Cafe, we're going to start with our usual crowdsourced news update. If you've got anything to share from where you live, something that's happening nationally or even internationally, please put your hand up. We'd love to hear whether you've got kind of something to share with us or something that you would like to comment on. Um, Following that, we have got two speakers tonight, councillors Ed Lamb and Kate Collier. Uh, um, Ed Lamb is from Wirral Council, Kate Collier is based in Worcester, and they're both going to talk about motions to council that they have put forward on children's play and child-friendly streets. I've heard Ed and Kate speak at kind of two separate forums and think it would be really amazing to hear from them here together and be able to ask them questions around the work that they've been doing to kind of promote play and generally kind of work around like making cities more child friendly where they live. So before we move on to Ed and Kate, I am going to take news, and there are a few hands up already. H, do you want to come in first?
Okay, yeah, probably uh, three items. I was having a discussion with a guy who does electric assist conversions, and we were discussing the torque rating of the motors. And there seems to be a standard at about 65 Newton meters, but you have to narrow that down to 50 Newton meters for front wheel drive because the weight transfer lifts the weight off the front wheel. And when you power up a front wheel with more than 50 Newton meters of torque, it skids. We've had that. I've nearly come off twice on that sort of situation. And we find some people are talking in terms of torque of 1.6 Newton meters, which is quite a bit of a kick when you pedal and get electric assist. That can be quite a shock and maybe the cause to a lot of people coming off. I'm not quite sure what the spec is for line bikes and dot bikes and things like that, but I have an awful feeling that we may find that the balance and the geometry and the power that's going on when you pedal is causing a problem. Plus a little advert for Go Stroud. They're now running an express coach to West Drayton direct, which is getting very much like what we've got in Scotland, doing request stops at Cirencester and so forth. And a little bit of news on the push to dual carriageway, the border crossing at Chepstow. And they're talking in terms of a minibus service to try and ease it off, which is active travel because you can cycle to the minibus and get over.
Thank you, H. Adam, do you want to come in?
Yeah, this one's a kind of a national thing. So, Keep Britain Working Review update came published 3rd of July. It's a June 2026. It identified the cost of ill health to the economy and businesses at 212 billion, or about £3,000 per head per year. But then and then basically ask employers to do something about it. What it fails to do is pull in anything to do with the CWIS 3 stuff around, which also states things around how active travel can help save 5 million workdays. So the cost basically comes down to £3,000 per head per year, and we're spending £16 per head per year through CWIS 3 on active travel. So that's the sort of level of that we're working at. But I just thought I'd make that clear. But if you do want to look into this stuff, I think most campaign groups are asking for about £50 per head, about £35 on infrastructure and £15 on behaviour change for active travel. And when you place it within the context of cost per head of £3,000 per year, it doesn't sound like a lot for the benefits that you might gain.
Thank you, Adam. That's interesting to know. And Catherine.
Yeah, just very quick news from Dundee. Dundee Cycle Hub have finally managed to get all their facilities up and running at the Green Transport Hub. So it's, for those who don't know, it was an old, horrible multi-storey car park that's been converted into a sustainable transport hub. So it's got lots of EV parking spaces that are powered by solar panels. But the missing link was that the ground floor for cycle and walking wasn't fully open. That is now the case. So they've got secure cycle parking, which is accessed by a key fob that you have to pay for, so that is genuinely secure. There's showers, and they've got an indoor pump track and skills track, so for the young ones learning how to cycle, and actually just because it's fun, that's in there as well. I think the shop's doing a roaring trade, so that's a really good incentive for the council to actually get around to building their sustainable transport corridors because it's actually quite hard to cycle to at the minute. So that's good news from Dundee.
Thank you. Always good to have good news. Thanks, Catherine. Tim.
Uh, I might nick that. We've had 2 multi-stories closed because not enough people are parking in Leicester because they're all on bikes, maybe. The thing I was going to mention is national because it's London, and that's always national, isn't it? The news where they are. And I saw this on social media, Sally, from Leo Murray last night. Tonight's Hammersmith and Fulham cabinet meeting has just voted to approve their officer's recommendation not to pour any more time or energy into the doomed effort to bring cars back over the river on the Hammersmith Bridge. It's a major moment for West London, this, and it will soon be looked back on as good, actually.
Fantastic. That's very good news.
I'm not sure what the MP thinks.
Good news.
Yeah, sorry for nicking it from the Londoners. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Tim. Any more news before we move on to our speakers? Nope. Great. I'm going to hand over to Ed first. Ed, I'll let you introduce yourself and share your slides.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces and Beth's dog as well. Didn't see the dog, but hopefully later on. Right, I'm going to get my slides up.
Brilliant.
Coming through, Sally.
Yeah, all good.
Right. Okay. Yeah, really grateful to be able to pop on and present to you tonight, folks. I'm talking about playing out, and I did listen back last night to Alice and Tim, I think it was, from playing out. I think they presented a month or 2 back. So I know a lot of you are probably up to speed with where it is, but yeah, Katie and I are going to give a bit of local context and hopefully some inspiration about how you can get this on your council's agenda. So a quick bit of background for myself, and I should just say I'm at the LGA conference. I've got a lanyard and everything, Councillor Ed Lamb, and I'm in this quiet little room, and people could burst in at any second. So apologies, but yeah, I'll only be 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, I'm a councillor on Wirral. I've got a background, as some of you may know, in campaigning and active travel. Probably 8, 9 years or so locally, regionally and nationally. I work with Roger Geffen, who I know probably shows up to this meeting much more than I do, on Low Traffic Future as well. That's a part-time gig that I do on the side too. So not on the side, it's part of my crazy life. So yeah, quite a rounded view on transport and health and all that stuff. And as Adam's just said before, these things are all rolled into one, and that's partly why I got this motion going. I do have two young lads, and they are in that picture there. Sadly, they're quite a bit older than that now, so they're sort of beyond the age of playing out, but still, hopefully we can get some of this stuff in place in time for when I'm hopefully a grandparent, but and hopefully a lot of time before that too. So why playing out and why emotion? When I became a councillor, I had this sort of list 3 years ago, 2023, I got elected. I had this sort of list of things I kind of would like to do in my time, in my initial 4 years. And one of them was to introduce or to get a bit more focus on playing out. I was aware of the charity Playing Out previously, and I had children at the time who were at that age where they were playing out. And I live in this cool little spot in Wirral where the houses are built so that children can play out. That's actually my youngest lad there, just about to kick a football through a window on this cool bit of grass outside our home, which was built to enable playing out. We don't do house building like that anymore, so that's a little part of the puzzle as well. So yeah, I managed to convince my fellow group of councillors, I'm a Green councillor, that when it came time to submit a motion to council, as we do every 3 months, we could do one on outdoor play for kids, and my fellow councillors agreed that it would be a good idea. So I headed off and created something. And why a motion? There are various ways that a councillor can get work done through a council. And one of them is to present a motion to council. So every few months, your council will have what's called full council meeting, and most political groups should be given the opportunity to present a motion for debate and discussion, and to get something if they want on the work programme, or to write a letter to an MP, all that kind of thing. So it's quite a cool way of getting work out there and doing it in quite a public setting as well, and discussing it. Oh, next slide. So yeah, the motion itself, I'll share a link to it. I'm just going to talk about the process really, and hopefully not steal too much of Kate's thunder. But initially it was going to be called Yes Ball Games, but after a bit of discussion with fellow councillors of my own group, we settled on, well, actually, I don't think the actual title there, Enabling Outdoor Play and Community Belonging, I think it was actually someone in Dem Services, one of the officers at Wirral Council, came up with it. It's sort of, we wanted to create something that didn't kind of freak out certain councillors that thought we'd think we might be coming for parking spaces and all that stuff. So, and I'm not really, well, partly, but so yeah, that's the title we went through. Went through various stages of editing and tweaking, and if you look at the motion itself, it's got all the evidence in there around outdoor play, the health benefits, the kind of fears that parents have around traffic, that kind of stuff. The work that Playing Out and Alice and her team, Ingrid, Lucy, have done was amazing. And then the Raising the Nation report too, which came out last year, was really helpful to be able to link to. Yeah, and you'll be able to see, again, I can post this stuff to you, the speech on the night. It was I had to be quite careful. I wanted it to pass. And instinctively, as a Green councillor, sadly, we kind of get other groups don't like what we have to say. So I had to word it very carefully to make it impossible for people to vote against, which was harder than you might think, or maybe not. But if you look at the link to the wording itself, it's kind of been chopped and changed a little bit and amended by the Labour group and the Lib Dems in quite a friendly way, to be honest. And I worked with other groups to shape it so that I knew on the night I had a good chance of getting through. And the speech itself, I had some fun with that, which you can watch back at your leisure if you want. And I very much kind of focused on the kind of reminiscing, the good old days of kids playing out and all that kind of stuff to kind of sell it. You can see all this on the Playing Out website. They've archived it on one of the pages. After that, well, I can report that it did pass unanimously, which was fantastic. And then we spread the good news. So, this is something that residents are really happy to hear about. This isn't just something for Green councillors. Any councillor of any colour, I hope, can present stuff like this, and it will go down an absolute storm with residents. So, it went in our newsletters and press releases and all that stuff. So, yeah, please do copy and paste if you wish. And just to sum up, really, the next steps. So, working with officers after it kind of passed. There's a bit of time. It's about a year ago since, in fact, is almost a year to the day when I first proposed the motion. It takes a little while for things to get on the work programme. And had an initial conversation with a officer at Wirral Council in the public health team, and their words were that it was a gift. The motion was a gift to the work that they were doing. I had noticed that what's called the Active Wirral strategy, which is sort of the strategy around public health and getting people out and about, was due to be refreshed. So that's partly why I was so keen to get it through. And I wanted to make that strategy a bit less about getting people to the gym and a bit less, about like structured play and health, and a bit more about, just kind of kids and people of all ages being able to go out the front door and get that kind of ambient health kick that I think I've heard it discussed as recently. So thankfully, officers at the council understood that, and they're kind of progressing that through the system now. Really pleased to be able to say that they're linking well with the transport and highways teams, which is something that I kind of was a bit concerned about, because there's quite a bit of siloed thinking going on at times at councils, but everyone seems to be understanding it and working together. And beyond that as well, I'm not holding back, and I'm speaking with officers at a regional level. So Wirral is part of the Liverpool City region, and I'm working with Merseyside Sports Partnership and Sport England to kind of hopefully scale this stuff up a little bit further too. So it's fairly early days, but encouraging, and I would very much recommend folks whether you're a councillor or a campaigner that can take this to a councillor that you know. There's a bit of a win-win really on health, on transport. Yeah, it's something that you should be able to take to folks of all colours really. So I'm going to stop now, and hopefully I haven't stolen too much of Kate's thunder, who's done similar, but that's the story from my side. Hopefully that's all right. But yeah, thanks for letting me share it. All right, Sally.
Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thank you, Ed. I think we'll hear Katie's first, and then we'll come to questions for both of you, because I think that obviously there's quite a bit of overlap. Katie, are you there? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to
I
share?
am good to go. Yes, I will. Let's just slideshow that. There we go. Right then. No, Ed, perfect. And it's important that Ed goes first, because actually, Ed gave me a bit of a kick up the bum to try and take the motion to Worcester Council. And I think it's good to hear from different councils as well, because it kind of makes you go, can happen there, it can happen there, it can happen everywhere. So that's brilliant. Thank you. I'm Kate Collier. I am the bike bus co-founder here in Worcester. So we have a huge bike bus scheme that we run in Worcester with Bike Worcester. I am and also a critical maths organizer here in Worcester. I'm a trustee for Play Worcester, which is a charity that we set up to champion for children's right to play here in the city. I'm also a cargo bike mum, so like I'm all the cliches because I've got pink hair and I wear dungarees and I've got a cargo bike. And I'm also, in October 2023, I was elected as a Green councillor to Worcester City Council. So got all those little all those little roles in the mix that were kind of informing me as I was coming towards this. Here's a lovely picture of one of our play streets we had here in Worcester recently, and there's a gentleman there in the middle who's actually the county councillor for the area, so shows that support is trickling through. Right, so a bit like what Ed was talking about, why playing out, why did we go for this? We were coming at it from a children's rights perspective, so like a spatial justice perspective, as well as a public health perspective, which is actually always the angle that seems to kind of like gather the most sort of response, I think, from other members, which is really interesting. Probably the driving force behind bringing the motion was the amount of anti-child or anti-youth sentiment that we had, and that was kind of coming out as anti-play sentiment. And for us, that was coming out especially in the old Facebook groups or on the Worcester News, and it was just becoming quite status quo to say that we shouldn't have children anywhere. And we'd also, children are always on their screens, they're never outside, but equally, please don't play anywhere near me. So those are kind of a lot of the challenges we're seeing here locally in Worcester. Also wanted to sort of challenge the idea that play was just fixed play equipment, and we have a couple of years ago actually, Worcester City Council passed what is a really brilliant, and I'll try and share a link, play plan for Worcester, which had the potential to be absolutely really kind of change the shape of play across the city, but members became so fixated and leadership became so fixated on fixed play equipment that then the progress and the impact from the play plan has been quite slow. And I was always really taken by the fact that our children's childhoods are like dripping away as we just kind of like sit and make decisions about whether to build a pump track or whether to refurb the splash pad. And so I was really motivated by something that was low cost, high impact. How can we get children out now in our cities? Operation Raise the Flag. So all the flags that started to appear in cities last summer, Worcester was and continues to be quite affected by that, and community division and fracturing had been evident. And so I saw especially the play streets idea as a really brilliant way to community build. And so I always credit Ed with the title of the motion, but he's now saying it was an officer. So I just think enabling outdoor play and community belonging is just absolutely, how could anybody argue against that? It's just perfect. Why else? It was also just really fun. Like there's loads of stuff that we pass in council that's like a bit boring. Why can we not? Let's pass something that's really fun. And I got excited about it because I wanted to hear people speak, positively about play, I'd say. Oh yeah, hopefully I can share this. Got a really, really cool Worcester play plan. But it wasn't allowing things to happen here and now. What it missed was, well, not the plan missed, but what members couldn't take from that. The action they took from it was all focused on fixed play equipment. Right, I went in with loads of asks. I'll just flash them up on screen. I wanted all these things in my initial iteration of my motion. I wanted it to go into our planning policy. I just wanted the world to change. No ball game signs, have our play streets, for us to sort of make a public declaration. I wanted us to be inching closer to a child-friendly city. But obviously that's my first iteration. And then I had to go talk nicely to all the other parties and all the other councillors, and especially Councillor Robin Norfolk, who is part of the Labour group. She was just absolutely amazing, like my biggest sort of partner and champion in getting that through. So the cross-party working was amazing. Robin, in fact, pointed me to the fact that we were about to pass our South Worcestershire Development Plan, and it included a reference, as you can see on the screen there at the bottom, a reference to prioritising people over vehicular traffic. So, hurrah, brilliant. So instead of kind of putting that into my motion as well, I just highlighted this as I took it to council, just kind of trying to do a bit of that joined up thinking. And this is where we eventually got to. So making sure that we are working with our housing partners to make sure any of those signs that might unintentionally make children feel unwelcome or discourage play are disappearing, to try and build a way for residents to feel empowered to develop play streets with support from the council and ongoing reports into it. So that's where we got to, which was great. And we were very happy. There we are on the night when we got it passed. There's 2 activists there and then 2 councillors. It was excellent. Why do I think it worked? Well, I did some heavy borrowing from Ed and the Wirral, which was really good. We had worked really hard at successful pilot play streets. So once we already had a number going from a Play Worcester perspective, it was then really easy to make the sell. We were saying this is happening and this is the impact and it's marvellous. Can we give wider council to support for this? Don't you all want to see this in your wards, in your divisions? And that came from Play Worcester and like relentless, irritating lobbying from them. Bike Worcester, also massively important. The bike buses in our city have been really crucial for making the point that our children deserve and need space in our streets as well. So the bike buses have been really instrumental in it for making the point that our streets should also be for our children. The cross-party working and then getting to the point where we're really clear about what the actions might look like. So that's why I think it succeeded. What next? It's now I'm at the point where my motion passed in November, so I'm behind Ed, but pushing on what the follow-up actions were and also challenging decisions. So it's really interesting how long it takes for this thinking to filter through. Recently, some goalposts disappeared from near my house. And I had to challenge it because it contravened what we passed in this motion. We'd said we were going to champion and not do things to damage play without talking and involving young people. And that had sort of been quite a knee-jerk reaction to some supposed antisocial behaviour. Worcester, the importance of context here is that Worcester is going to undergo local government reorganisation in the next 12 to 24, who knows how many months. So we've really got an eye on how this becomes embedded in whatever that new authority looks like. How can we work with our neighbouring authorities and what will that look like wider in Worcestershire? I think that was all I wanted to say. I was gonna, I have my nonsense is out there on social media if any of you are up for it. I'm generally the positive to play for because I'm ridiculous. And then I've also got my bike whisperer and my play Worcester stuff. So give us a follow if you're interested. That's it from me. Let me stop sharing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. And yeah, I mean, but thanks both of you for sharing that. Just really amazing work and really, really inspiring. I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of questions. I'm going to ask them first. I wondered whether, I think because it feels like a little bit like we're having a bit of a play moment at the minute. There's not necessarily a lot of action on the ground, but there's a lot more talk about play, sort of perhaps more than there has been for some time, and more of a focus on play. And there is the new APPG on play, and it still feels a little like, and I suppose Kate, you kind of alluded to that, that play is, and you as well, Ed, really that kind of that play is still really thought of in terms of playgrounds, and um, I suppose thinking kind of upwards to some of these, new kind of configurations that are sort of happening around play, perhaps in Parliament and elsewhere, and I think then looking down as to how that kind of filters through, and in both directions, it seems a bit of a struggle to move the focus away from just playgrounds, but still saying that playgrounds are also okay, but we need to do more than just playgrounds, and a lot more, and as you say, Kate, a lot faster. And I suppose moving into that, transport is one of the difficult areas to sort of get that into. And we had Jen Rutherford from Leeds a few months ago, or even last year, talking about place efficiency in Leeds and what was happening then. And again, possibly still there is a difficulty in getting kind of transport sort of in kind of engaging with transport around that. So I wondered, yeah, if both of you could talk to that, I suppose where you see kind of, what do we do to sort of change some of those things, where you might be seeing it change for the better? What else you think might needs to happen?
Yeah, I can have a little go if that's all right. Me, I want to jump
That's a
in
big
front of you there,
question.
Ed.
Go
But
for it.
no, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting that in a lot of my sort of like activist and then counsellor journey, actually, it did start with active travel. It started with the fact that like I didn't feel safe enough to get on a bike, and all the challenges that are still presented. If anybody's not familiar with Worcestershire, we did manage to achieve a 0 in the Active Travel England ratings when they came out a couple of years ago. So that's kind of where we are context wise. I do think for me, uh, it's the independent mobility is the bit for me, because I want children to be able to achieve independent mobility before secondary school. Like I think it's mad that we kind of go into secondary school as the time that they should then be allowed to walk or cycle places. I want to see my 8-year-olds being able to move about freely, and so I think obviously play is a massive value in itself, but it's really interesting to see play able to challenge car culture and like car dominance, and it which actually people are very, very sensitive to, and people get very defensive about that as an issue, don't they? But I think we want well, I want this generation of children to be happy and healthy, and to feel like they are citizens in their own cities, in their own localities. A lot of that depends on whether they feel they can walk and they can cycle and they can just like hang out and play where they live. So I think that is where you're right, it feels like play's having a moment, but I think that's because they are so massively intertwined when you're a child. I don't think I've answered your question particularly there, but I think that's where I kind of come at it, is the fact that it's the independent mobility. I want, these children that they're out having a play street, they're going to age out of the play street, but I want them to be going elsewhere, walking on their bike. And that's not going to happen if we don't change our approach to transport in this country and across our county. So that's all I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go. It's tricky, and I was gutted to have missed the Curious Cities event a couple of weeks ago in London because of the blooming heat wave and trains messed up and all that. But I watched it online, a lot of it And it does feel like there's a bit of something happening, doesn't it? It's like there's things going on and lots of things are being joined up, which is exciting. I'm particularly interested in housing and how we can, on Wirral, and I'm sure in lots of places where people are listening in, there's a lot of housing due to be delivered in the coming 10, 15 years. If we can pull our fingers out and figure out where to put it all in the right places and that stuff. But that appears to be an opportunity to embed and enable outdoor play. It's going to be hard though, because we're trying to reverse 40, 50 years of car culture and habit. And there's that phrase about strategy eats culture for breakfast, or is it no? Yeah, no, sorry, it's the other way around. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So very conscious that we're developing lots of great strategies that can be devoured quite easily by people driving their kids to school, not because they're evil, but because that's just the done thing, isn't it? So working on the culture and the storytelling, and that's what I focused on a lot in my speech on the night, and in following up, is about just telling that positive story about the good old days, when you could go out and play with your mates and that kind of stuff. So yeah, the storytelling is really, really important, but I'm hopeful we can get there.
I suppose, and on that note, have either of you found that kind of, good, other than that sort of talking directly to council, what are the other good ways of telling those stories? I mean, I know, Kate, you do quite a lot of kind of work locally, and Ed, I suppose, in your different places, is that happening? Are people able to tell those different stories?
Want to go, Kate? Me, because you're trying to think of something to say like me. Yeah, I think so. I said in my own little bit before that the first thing the officer said to me, the sort of senior officer for active Wirral, was that the motion was a gift. So I think there are a lot of good people, good professionals that are looking for stuff like this kind of story to tell, so that they can build it in, because we've been doing things a certain way in the UK on transport and on health for a long time, and it's not working particularly well. I've been lucky enough to speak to Chris Boardman as well fairly recently, and I was in fact, it was Kate last year. I saw Kate at the Active York event, and when I bumped into you probably about a week or two before my motion went through, and Chris Whitty, he presented at that conference and that event, and it's so there's a lot of professional expertise. I'm still trying to crack the nut locally in sort of my local health trusts within the NHS world, which seems like a tricky place. For me, I found it hard to get in there and tell that story to health professionals that have unbelievable, and that the NHS as a thing has an astronomical budget. And from my point of view, a lot of that budget could be spent better in other ways, like what I've been talking about, like simple things like benches, so people can walk to the shops a little bit more easily and have a place to rest. So yeah, just telling the story to professionals in a simple way, I think is important.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Kate, and I suppose it's that I kind of, I'm just even thinking about today, an event that I went to, and two people who didn't even know me talked to me about their local area, and how difficult it is to walk and cycle with children, and like children need space to play, and so there are it's not as though lots of people are not experiencing that, and often people who don't have access to a car, are even more likely to perhaps experience that. But those people often are not heard, or yeah, I don't know what from the work that you've done, Kate.
I've worked quite heavily with that our strategy, or is this a strategy? I'm not even sure if it is. But what I found effective, because the noise had been so negative just generally about, and it's very easy, especially when you're an activist, it can get quite, especially in the active travel world, it gets incredibly demoralizing, doesn't it? Like, I'm go out on my bike every single day, and I'm close past every day, and regularly get abuse shouted at me and all the rest of it. So it's really easy to fall into like an Eeyore place, isn't it? Because you're so angry. You're so well, I am. And I think what's worked really well, especially around this motion, is spent quite a lot of time going into like community groups in lots of different areas, and trying to work with community groups to make them feel empowered. And it's almost been like instead of the motion being like this is happening and it's going to happen to all your neighborhoods, and it's been a time cost because it's been a lot of popping to different community events and community groups, but trying to make the community feel empowered to be like, this is the offer and these are the ways we can support you. How could we help you make this happen for your children and for your community? And so I am quite a fan of the old like soft community approach, which I know takes a lot more from a resource and a time perspective. But like all of those individual like positive actions and working to help people feel empowered is what sort of blooms the those really positive and powerful stories. And it might take a while, but I just think that community group to community group, like street to street, that might be how we sort of make the bigger change, hopefully.
And then I suppose the sort of flip kind of that, and what in terms of, I think you both, perhaps you Ed especially, talked about having to think carefully about your wording. Where have you found the sort of the most, what have you found it really difficult to sort of, that you had to take out or you had to adjust in such a way because it was just too wild to propose such a thing?
Yeah, it was unanimously passed. The amendments from Labour and Lib Dem. I think the Lib Dem one was focused around ensuring that older residents weren't forgotten about, which I was quite happy to take the advice on. And I think that there's a couple of older Lib Dem councillors that have been around a while, and they probably helped residents get those no ball game signs put up in the first place, and they were put there for a reason, weren't they? Because whether it was verges or plants being trampled or windows being smashed, yeah, they were put there for a reason. So yeah, that was part of the Lib Dem thing, was not that we were not going to take down the no ball game signs. We do plan to still, but the wording was more around in consultation with residents, and ensuring that we take into account the feelings of older residents, which is fine. So I found it a really healthy process, actually working with other parties on shaping the wording. But that was the main thing that stood up in terms of stood out from the changes that I had to make from my initial draft.
That's interesting to hear. Kate, do you have anything?
Quite a few people of influence, members and others, who just the idea of giving over any space, especially road space, even for a really short amount of time, to anything other than car traffic, it's just really, really, really triggering, I think, for them. And I had to work really hard at like playing it cool and being like, that's a very common concern, like I hear you, like da, 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 da. In fact, one person, I think it's actually a parish councillor, not a district councillor, said, I do not pay my council tax to have yobs playing out on my street. Which was really interesting, because then, like, on the flip side, it means that I do pay my council tax to have people speeding down my street, and I do pay my council tax to have people, driving illegal, so it's just really interesting what kind of pokes people and what doesn't. So that was the main thing. Just like, how dare you infringe on people's right to have the right to drive wherever they want, whenever they want, all the time, and trying to sort of bring that conversation down a little bit. So yeah, mainly around that.
I'm going to take some questions from the Q&A. If anybody wants to ask a question, though, as well in person, please do stick your hands up. The first is Tim Register, if I pronounced that correctly, who says, is this an idea for a local plan policy? We are just redoing the Babber Mid Suffolk Joint Local Plan. Has anybody done this?
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, and I probably should know, because our local plan was passed last year, but we are actually just about having to redraft it again because of all the house building target changes. So I haven't got an answer, but I'm sure it will be. There will be a way that you can embed it into house building plans, I would have thought.
And H has said bike are kid magnets. Oh, I don't know if you want to ask that in person. H, is he gone? He's
Yeah,
gone.
I'll come back on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to sort of
that
say a
was
little bit about that?
well, that was 1994 when Karen and George was setting up bike repair, engagement at local schools to try and keep the kids off the street, engage them in doing something useful. And lots of kids were sort of earning bikes to give to their siblings as well, getting more and more people on bikes. And this was written as a handbook showing you what you needed to set up a bike hub in 1994. George's biography was quite interesting. When George's parents left home, he set off, and George was quite a character. But it's available as a download, and I can probably give some links to it.
Yeah, thanks, H. That would be great. Yeah, I mean, I'm presuming that you both got sort of detached youth work going on. Is there anything around bikes in your areas?
So we, from a Bike Worcester perspective, we try to do quite a bit of outreach work. We have a bike repair station on a trailer that we take out on a cargo bike. We rock up at, youth clubs and the rest of it and try and do some work that way. And in fact, we're actually currently plotting. We've had the manager of the local shopping centre agree to close the top floor of the car park for a couple of nights over the summer um, as a way to allow young people to come and cycle, skateboard, whatever, just hang out. And then our plan there is to have a bit of like fettling going on and that sort of thing. But I do think think that's a really good point. I think a lot of the points that I've made about young people being out and about on the streets is actually the more we've got to a point where so few people are out on the streets that those who are out feel even more intimidating and are like, whereas actually if we can kind of bring the critical mass of like many more people out and about, our communities do actually feel safer and are safer. That was my ramble.
Yeah, thank you. Ed, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, look, tons of active travel stuff going on Wirral and Liverpool City region. In general, lots of strategies and network plans and all that kind of stuff. Quite a bit of youth engagement, and I'm quite lucky in my ward in Bebington, Wirral. We had a livable neighbourhood design by Sustrans or Wheels Cycle Trust done a couple of years ago now. So I'm trying to desperately like turn those plans into reality. But there's tons of schools in my ward, so yeah, we've got lots going on around that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's interesting what's been said about Kate there and about. I think there was a bit of on the night which I had to kind of clarify in my kind of following up, summing up speech, that the motion isn't necessarily, it's for young kids. It's not for, because there was a bit of discussion about kids in hoodies and balaclavas riding around, and it's like, well, this isn't really for them. This is for young children that are kind of old enough to, or should be old enough to be independent and go and cross the road to knock for their mate and play hopscotch or chuck a tennis ball around, that kind of thing. So there's something about differentiating a motion like this for really young children. Older kids, as they get into their teenage years, can go further afield, or they should be able to. They should be able to get on their bikes or scooters or walk and get a bus. Miles and miles and miles from home. So that's a kind of separate bit of work, really. But it all ties in together, obviously. And my own children, it's quite cool to see that it's sad that they're not playing hopscotch out in the front anymore. And I enjoyed putting this little talk together because I was looking through all my old photos of that I took of them playing, so I was getting a bit emotional. But the things that I've taught them about, and allowing them to be out and about independently now stands them in good stead, because my eldest lad, 14, he's off every night with his mates. He goes to the gym on his own. He's miles from home, and I trust him to do that because he's grown up, just being out in the front with his pals, and now he can go miles and miles, and I just don't worry too much about him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Sort of, what children are going to do at different ages and and they grow up, but it's they might need different things at different times, but yeah, they don't just become, that I think that those that teenage years is really tricky, I think, in terms of public perceptions, particularly of children, young people. And yeah, I think if we do more for younger children, does that have a positive impact on, as Kate says, getting more children and young people outside and able to travel, able to
So, so,
play.
Sally, can I add to that slightly? I know only in London, but I haven't seen it anywhere else, that we have bikes up, knives down as a youth engagement with about 6,000 kids invading central London, complete with police escort. And I don't know if that's anything like that's going on anywhere else in the country, where they show off on bikes rather than stabbing each other. And the other one
Yeah.
is the two of the bike hubs I know, one in Reading, where I think 80 to 90% of the British Gas service engineers are ex-Borstal at Feltham, because they were trained up to City and Guilds level 1 by being attracted in to work on bikes, get a qualification, get a reference, and immediately walk into jobs. And that is a big problem we've had notified at the moment, that young people have not got the references and the skills to walk into jobs.
Yeah, thanks, H. Yeah, I think there's been a bit of a craze over the last year for large groups of young people on bikes in cities. John, sorry, you've waited a long time, very patiently.
Hi everyone, John Monroe, Better Streets for Birmingham here. Thanks so much, Ed and Kate. This is so inspiring. My question is, have in either of these locations, have these motions got you to the point yet where so much as one parking space or like any kind of space for cars is being permanently taken away? And if you've got to that point, how did that go?
Oh, that's a big question. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. John, awesome to see you, man. It's no from me, sadly, or at least not relating to the motion that I put forward. No, and in fact, I think it's partly because my kids are the age where I'm not actually going out with wheelie bins and formally closing or opening a road to young people. My motion wasn't really about enabling that for families, although they will be able to if they want to, I hope. Mine was more about trying to encourage that sort of longer term shift for unstructured kids just going out. But no, I mean, this has been recorded and published, isn't it? But I don't mind saying that I do hope as an output of this, we will be able to on Wirral be able to introduce things like low traffic neighborhoods and residential parking permits, all that kind of stuff, just to limit the amount of cars stored and moving around the borough. I've got no qualms in saying that. So we've got elections next year, so if and when and how we get on, I will certainly be using the motion as like evidence and a reason to do things like that. But yeah, sadly, nothing to report back just yet, John. But you'll be the first to know, even when it happens.
Thanks, Ed. Kate.
Yeah, same for me. You will be the first to know. I feel like no, the answer is no, but I feel like in Worcestershire, we were coming from a place that was so far from that, any like just so far from a mindset wise. And in fact, even this week, the nearest town to us in the neighbouring authority, but with local government organisation, will be part of. Yeah, Worcester City will be part of their, making big announcements about their ambitions for all of their town centre parking to be free, and you know that's that's where lots of people locally are. So we are, yeah, it's going to be a long old journey to kind of move the dial, but we've locked in now, so we're doing it and we're going. But that would be the aim.
And it's hugely moving the dial. Again, there isn't an applied criticism. Have you not done this yet? Obviously, it's brilliant, and you're getting us to a place. And there's certain campaigns I've been involved with here in Birmingham that I'm just totally like learning, taking notes on what you're doing to get to the success that you've got. So thank you for your individual locations, but it's good, example for all of us across the country. So thanks.
Thanks, John. I'm going to pick up questions again. I've got Tim. Tim says various things. When were the good old days? Was it that when we were kids, regardless of how old we are? And mentions that the London health trusts are big on active travel health link. I'm not sure whether Tim, you want to say something about that. Was that a specific?
I think it's Bart's in particular. If you pop onto that, if you put those words into St. Bartholomew's Hospital Trust, whatever it is, in the City of London, they've got a whole piece about active travel and about getting to the hospital and so on in a way that I haven't seen in lots of NHS settings. The bit about the good old days, I've sat in meetings with people telling me that it was great in the old, when we were young, people could leave their front doors open and borrow a cup of sugar, and it was great. And I always ask them, so when was that? And they go, the 1990s. And I go, seriously? I was old in the 1990s. And we were saying that about the 1950s. So it's that disconnect. But in my street outside, there are far more cars than there used to be. We used to run, if the World Cup was on, there were football matches every evening. There was the Olympics, there were races up and down the pavements, kids playing hide and seek around lampposts. And every now and then a car would come and the kids would yell car. And that's in my children's lifetime, who are in their 30s now. But there's nobody doing that in our street now. That said, the park at the end of the road, I've seen piles of bikes next to the cricket square and the kids jumpers for footballs and whatever. So there's much more independence. Post-COVID, we had a very long lockdown. It gave people a lot of time to work out different ways of traveling and moving around the neighborhood. We had a year of it. And I think that has made quite a big difference. You see people ride their bikes to the park now rather than necessarily drive. Too much.
But then I think you had a third question or comment, Tim, which I think is actually an interesting one to think about. But sort of Tim says he wonders if the move to a neighbourhood focus, such as Pride in Place, is going to make much of a difference. And I suppose here, is it then just going to go back to being about playgrounds? I think that's there's been a lot of talk about playgrounds in terms of Pride in Place.
Yeah, because of the capital element that you have to use. But equally, where I am, there's why don't we resurface the car park so people with disabilities can actually get into the park, which is a big part of our area? And can we resurface the paths through the park so people with different abilities to move around can access that? And can we have some lighting through there? Those sorts. So I think the potential could be there for, topping up a bike route through a neighbourhood, for example, and not having to rely on Active Travel England, but the residents saying, we've decided to commit £500,000 of this year's £2 million towards it. I'll shut up.
I don't know if either of you've got any thoughts on.
Yeah, Pride in Place is a great shout. I'm still trying to get my head around the structure of it. We've got three areas that are benefiting from investment, I hope. So it's a good shout, and I need to do a bit of work there, kind of trying to link what council has passed to that. And just on the good old days stuff, I mean, I used it as a bit of a cynical political tool, really, in the sense that, just trying to get folks to think about. It's a powerful tool, isn't it? And it's obviously not always used for positive reasons. The kind of good old days can mean a lot of things to various political colors. The good old days for me were in the 90s, when I was playing out with my brother and my sister and my mates across the road. But yeah, I try not to share them too often, but those pictures of like beautiful terrace streets back in the 1900s, when there was no cars and there's kids playing out, rolling a hoop around. But there's a wider story there, because they probably had a life expectancy of about 35 or 40. So there's a bit of a darker story. So it was just kind of rude, just weird political motivation, just to use that good old days nostalgia, really, which is it worked. And now we can move forward and hopefully create a version of the future where kids can play out and live well into their 80s and 90s as well, still riding a bike or an e-bike, and or walking to the shops and sitting on a bench that one of us here might have helped fund, found that tiny little bit of money that it takes that councils don't have apparently at the moment. But yeah, hopefully we can find it.
And then Beth's got a question around teenage girls. Have seen lots recently about teenage girls trying to find places for them to hang out. Any thoughts or experience on this?
Yeah, I'll go that it has been quite a key line of sort of any of my movement and like action forward as we're trying to progress the actions is I keep saying, and yes, what about? So people people just love a mugger, don't they? They really do. But lots of the evidence is that that's not for that's not necessarily for lots of teenage girls. It's not where they feel safe. Not all teenage boys either, or other um, folk. And so it's always kind of been on, it's been sort of like the line I keep pushing. And I think that comes in a lot of with the fixed play ideas. Councils tend to get like quite overexcited, don't they? So like we finally got a pump track built in Worcester, and it took forever. Well, it didn't take forever, it took a couple of years. And then we've done that, and they were like so pleased with themselves that they were like, "Oh, we'll have another one." And I've had to be like a proper Eeyore and been like, can we not have another one? Like, I know that you're all patting yourselves on the back, but overwhelmingly these are used by boys. So like now what, organizations like Make Space for Girls, can we do a bit of work of like talking to our young women in Worcester and sort of trying to work out what it is they want and how it is they want to travel. Side Passion Project is about kind of like getting lots of women and girls and then like teenage girls on bikes and feeling like that's something they can do. So I don't feel like I've definitely not done enough yet, but just always trying to keep it there. And like high on the agenda to say yes, and we haven't worked with them, we haven't asked for them, we haven't done any co-production with teenage girls yet. When are we going to do that?
And sorry, Sally, just to add to that, I've seen Tim's put a link there, or Make Space for Girls, which I need to look at. I'm very aware of that myself, even though I'm a fella and I've got two young boys. It would have been handy to have a boy and a girl. But the reason we didn't go with the Yes Ball Games name was because one of our councillors kind of thought, probably correctly, that ball games is something that again tends to be done by boys playing football or whatever in the street. So trying to make it inclusive in that sense. But I do need to do work personally, kind of just upskill there. But I do know officers are making sure that, because it's been mentioned to me already, that our local park, for example, which is getting a bit of investment soon, the stuff that's there is kind of centered around like boys sports and that kind of thing. So really important point to have mentioned that. So yeah, nice one.
And that kind of suppose that leads on to the Andy's question. What voice do you give to children and all this? And I suppose Kate, you've touched on that, talking about asking, and the Ed talking, asking officers to be asking children and young people. How easy is it to do that? How much capacity?
So when I'm out and about, especially with Play Worcester, we always have an element of feedback from young people, usually from sort of like dots on, on questions and all the rest of it. We try to gather as much informal as we possibly can. On my list of things I want to do next is, so we have a youth collaborative group here in Worcester who meets, every other month to talk about sort of youth provision with detached youth team and lots of partners around the room. We've not yet cracked having any youth voice on it. So my next sort of plan is to work out how we can do that in a meaningful way, in a way that actually works for young people, because they're not going to come at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday to sit in the Guildhall and talk necessarily in the way that we want them to. So so if anybody has any ideas, any good frameworks they already use. I was really inspired by is it Spark Hill in Birmingham? Spark Hill in Birmingham do amazing work with youth voice. So it is definitely on my list. I haven't done it yet.
Wirral's okay at it, and the livable neighbourhood scheme that I mentioned was sort of a gold-plated consultation event, really, and Sustrans, as they were called at the time, were funded to do an amazing amount of collaboration with schools, with parents, and with the kids, primary schools, secondary schools. And sure enough, this amazing report came back, said that people, including young people, are desperate for improved active travel facilities, for more investment in parks, in public spaces. So it's not something well, I say it's not something we can do. It's something we should be doing a lot more with consultations. And Tim's just put it in the chat now. We do have Youth Parliament and Youth Council on Wirral, where the council does a good a job as it can with limited resources to engage with young folks. But we need to do a lot more. Yeah, and me personally, as a councillor, when I'm sharing consultations and desperately trying to get people to fill them in, I do share them with schools and encourage the schools to send it to parents and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we probably need a whole other session on consultation and I think I mean, of course, because one of the big issues, and I've experienced this in Newcastle helping out with climate change forum, is that you can ask young people to what they think and they tell you, and then where does it go? Is somebody going to do something with it? Usually not. And they don't see it goes anywhere, and they don't see that they've made any change, and what does that tell them about, the value of what they have to say and about how local politics works. It's not a very good, it's not a positive feedback loop, is it? But yeah, I think just anybody making a big noise about children and children's needs is just so fantastic. So thank you so much for coming and sharing that with us. A big round of applause from everybody I can see. I mean, for me, one of the big challenges, and this is why I really, really value what you're doing, is that how do you get people to understand that play is active travel for children? They are not separate things. I think Active Travel England still seem quite some way from understanding that. But any ideas about how to get that on their agenda? Maybe we should invite them to come and talk about that. If nobody else has any other questions or comments, then I will wrap up. But yeah, massive thank you, Ed and Kate. We look forward to seeing what you do next. Please keep in touch, as you will do, I'm sure, and let us know. Just to say, this is our last session before our summer break. I'm looking at when we're back. I think we're back on the 15th of September, and we will be announcing who will be speaking in that first session over the summer. So just look out for the emails around that. And I hope you all have a good summer, whatever it is that you have planned. Thanks, everyone. Bye.